My name is Stephanie, and I work with Climbing the Seven Summits. I want to go ahead and jump into just a quick overview of our agenda and some introductions. So today, our agenda, it looks pretty straightforward, but we're going to have some fun. We're going to talk about the demographics of what the climbing landscape looks like, how old are actually climbers out there, and how does it look on different mountains and things like that. We'll talk about benefits and concerns of being a master mountaineer. And then we're going to jump into the good stuff. We're going to talk about fitness, mindset, nutrition, acclimatization, and thinking about all of this from the perspective of being 50 and older as you're aging. And then we're going to wrap things up talking about the Climbing the Seven Summits new program that we're launching, our Masters Mountaineering program. And we're kicking things off on Mount Baker and Kilimanjaro. And then we'll wrap up any final questions. Alrighty, so you all here to see our wonderful panelists today. So I'm excited to introduce to you Eva, who's joining us from Idaho. Hey, Eva.
Hi there.
I'm also joined by Alan Arnett. Hey, Alan, you're joining us from Colorado, correct?
Well, I'm on, you bet.
Woo-hoo, Alan is here. And then Dr. Emily is here. Stoked to have you all here with us. So what we want to do is really kick things off with a more dynamic introduction from our panelists today. We would love to know a little bit more about each of our panelists. So feel free to introduce yourself, share your climbing journey, how long you've been climbing, but we'd love to know what brought you to the mountains. We want to set the stage of a kind of a common ground that maybe some really neat things have brought us here and that there's some similar lines. So I'm going to go ahead and give this to Dr. Emily first. So Dr. Emily, go ahead and jump on in and give us a quick introduction and share what brought you to the mountains.
I grew up in Washington State, in Western Washington, so it's hard to get far away from the mountains there. I went to a summer camp when I was 12 and talked my way into a climb. Glacier Peak was the first one and had a blast. I fell into a crevasse. It was the coolest thing ever. They pulled me out and I was like, hey, can I do that again? And they were like, no, you can't. But that was the beginning of it for me. And then it just went on from there. My family, we were like hikers and stuff like that. We were skiers. But I knew at that age, I was just connected with the mountains. And I was lucky because I got started so early.
Awesome. Dr. Emily, thank you so much for sharing all that. And correct me if I'm wrong, you've been climbing for about, was it 42 or 49 years?
Well, you're dating me now.
I'm sorry.
I've been climbing since I was 12 and I'm 61. So somebody help me out with the math there.
A lot of years.
What's that? A lot of years. I took a military team up Mount Baker a couple of years ago. And a couple of the guys were kind of upset because it was so easy for me because I'd been guiding on Rainier all summer and everything. And these young bucks, And I said, dude, I first climbed this mountain 46 years ago. And they were just blown away. So long time.
And Dr. M, speaking of Rainier, I also caught something in one of the pictures you sent me that is maybe somewhere in this deck. I saw that one of the pictures was captioned your 100th Rainier summit.
Yeah, I've climbed it at least 130 times. There were a few years that I didn't count. I was one of the first female guides on Mount Rainier, like probably number 4, number 5 back in 89. So I've climbed it a lot of times. But that thing is beautiful. Every time you climb it, it's different. And every time it's beautiful. And I love it.
Incredible. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Alan. We're kind of going in reverse order of climbing time. So Alan's been climbing for about 30 years, and I'm going to let him take it over and introduce himself.
Hey, everybody. Really glad everybody came to this webinar. It's going to be a lot of fun. Similar to Dr. M, I first saw the mountains when I was like 12 years old. I was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, elevation 337 feet. People from Memphis don't climb mountains, but my family took us to Colorado to Estes Park when I was 12 years old, and I saw Long's Peak. And I think that's where the seed was planted. Well, fast forward, I graduated from college, got a good job with Hewlett-Packard, ended up living over in Geneva, Switzerland. I kept seeing Mont Blanc out my window, so I finally decided to go take a guided climb of Mont Blanc with a French guy who spoke no English and I spoke no French. I'm sure he was cussing me out the whole time because I knew absolutely nothing. But I fell in love with the sport. I took a trek to Everest Base Camp in 1997 where I fell in love with Nepal, and it just took off from there. Almost every year since then, I've done a major expedition, 7 summits, Aconcagua 3 times, Denali 3 times, except I didn't summit Denali because of weather mostly, Everest, K2, and the rest. And just fell in love with the sport. And the reason that I think that I really fell in love with it is that there's something about being in nature to me that's just spiritual. And like I said, I didn't start till I was 38. I summited Everest at 54 and K2 at 58. So everybody over 50, you can climb after 50. Hello, my name is Alan.
Awesome. Alan, thank you for sharing all of that. Now, I want to jump into Eva's introduction. Again, we're moving in reverse order. Eva's only been climbing for a few years, but she's been up to some really big things and some really exciting things, even coming up in just 21 days. So, Eva, go ahead and share a little bit more about yourself and your story and why the mountains.
Well, hello, everybody. It's such an honor to be here and share my story briefly. I'm new to climbing. I would say the mountains found me because in 2018, my husband of 26 years passed. And prior to that, I didn't do any kind of climbing. And when he passed, I realized that life was really short and precious. And I wanted to experience life, taste it, and see what I can do. And I had a fear of heights. So I decided to climb Mount Bora, which is the highest peak in Idaho. And it has a section that's called Chicken Out Ridge. And I thought, I have to get across that. So Chicken Out Ridge, I got across, got to the top of Mount Bora, and I just cried. I thought, oh my gosh, if I can do this, what else can I do? So in 2021, I was introduced to Mount Rainier. I'm from Germany. I didn't even know where Mount Rainier was. And so I signed up to climb Mount Rainier, didn't know what crampons were, never wore a harness, a helmet, or an ice axe. And at 11 o'clock at night, we start going up to the top. And I felt like I was climbing Mount Everest because this was so foreign to me. And when I got to the top, it was priceless. Just being way up there, overcoming the fear and seeing the view, I felt so at peace that when I came back down, I signed up for Everest Base Camp Trek. I went to Nepal. And then from there, I thought, well, what else can I do? And so I signed up for Denali and Aconcagua. And the mountains really, I feel, rescued me from my loss of my husband. And I was able to experience life and being present with myself and at peace. And so that's how I found the mountains. And I'm on my way to climb the 7 summits.
Wonderful. And Eva, where are you heading very soon?
So in exactly 21 days, I'll be on an airplane to Kathmandu because I am scheduled to climb Everest this spring. So I am very excited. There's a lot of emotions going on. There's anxiety, there's fear, but I'm also like, I can't wait to get there and then just experience the climb and see how I do in my body. Physically, I feel prepared, but I do know it's up to the mountain. It's up to her to open the gate to invite me up to the summit. And I hope she does.
Awesome. Yeah, Eva, thank you for sharing all that. And thank you for sharing your personal story as well. It's touching and it truly, I know at least means a lot to me and I'm sure everyone in this room as well. So thank you for that. I do want to share one thing. We were very intentional at Climbing the 7 Summits with choosing our panelists for this webinar. If we had Alan and Dr. M here who have been climbing for 30 or 40 years, it kind of feels out of reach because, they've been climbing for a very long time. Alan's a spectacular coach. He works with athletes and mountaineers all over the world. So his voice and his input into here's the acclimatization tips, here's nutrition tips that I share with my athletes, that's so valuable. Dr. M's a guide. She's been an ER physician. She's going to help us walk through, here's how your nutrition changes. Here's what your body is doing at altitude and what happens. But it's Eva being here, her first climb in 2021, that is showing you that it's all possible to start after 50. And so we wanted to get this range of folks here to show you that it's possible and then walk us through and really give the best expert advice, because Eva's living proof that you can do it at any age. And Alan and Dr. M just love to share their stories and help everyone reach the summit or reach whatever their goal is. So it was really intentional getting this group of people here together and making sure that you had access to all these just incredible humans with their incredible thoughts and skills. So I'm taking a look at the chat box while you guys are here.
These are great.
This last comment about spiritual, I think that's a really common feeling that a lot of people have, is that connection to nature, that, the world is a complicated, scary place these days, or always has been. And for me, I always found refuge in the mountains. And some people say it's a place to disconnect. Well, I think it's a place to connect with yourself. And there's something about mountaineering and climbing and being on any mountain, whether it's Mount Bora, which is 8,000 feet or something like that? No,
12,600.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter what the altitude is. What matters is that you're in the moment and that you're experiencing it and getting in touch with yourself and letting the mountain, letting that experience change you. That's always been one of my biggest motivations. People often ask me, why do you climb? I used to say, used to have little trite things like, it's for the view. But over the years, I finally realized that mountaineering actually is an experience that changes me, that it strips away any veneer I have, any pretense, any idea of who I thought I was. And I begin to understand that what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, and also how deep that I can go, what type of reservoirs I have, both physically and mental toughness. And when I come back home, I'm a better version of myself. And so that's really the reason that I like to climb.
I'd like to use words that are more eloquent than mine, just real quickly. Rene Dumal, this is why I climb. He said, you cannot stay on the summit forever. You have to come down again. So why bother in the first place? Just this. What is above knows what is below, but what is below does not know what is above. One climbs, one sees, one descends. One sees no longer, but one has seen. There's an art of conducting oneself in the lower regions by the memory of what one saw higher up. When one can no longer see, one can at least still know. I think that's so much more eloquent than climbing because it's there. That, I think, sums it up.
That's beautiful.
Nice.
I love it. So folks, we're really trying to paint this picture that, we all love the mountains. We're here to connect with ourselves or sometimes disconnect from the busy world, but ultimately that oftentimes brings us back to ourselves. So however we look at that, in that disconnection, we oftentimes connect with ourselves, connect with nature, connect with the experience and your teammates. Speaking of teammates, I want to jump into our first kind of nitty-gritty slide. So I want to look at what does the demographics actually look like out there? Because a lot of times we have some preconceived notions about what the climbing world looks like. So we went ahead and pulled the numbers from Denali. Alan was kind enough to pull the numbers from Everest. And I also then tapped the knowledge from Mike and Caroline, the co-owners at Climbing the Seven Summits, to get a sense of the average age of climbers that we see at CTSS. And so I'll start with that. And then I'm going to have Alan talk a little bit about Denali and Everest and the changes we're seeing in the landscape there. So to kick things off at Climbing the Seven Summits, our average climber age is 46, just out the gates, 46. About half of our climbers are also female, and we think that that's incredible. So pretty diverse audience out there. Our youngest trekker, Everest Base Camp, was 9 years old. Our youngest climber pictured here is Emma. Emma's incredible at 15 years old. She's 16 now, and that's her dad with her, and she is on the way to Everest with Eva. And we are excited to watch what happens. And then our oldest climber was 81 years old. And that climber summited Kilimanjaro, which is quite incredible. So this paints a really big picture. Super big range of ages that we have going on these expeditions with Climbing the Seven Summits. So Alan, can you give us a little overview of what it looks like for Denali and Everest, and then just add in a little bit about how these numbers are shifting or changing, if they are?
Yeah, and as you can see on the screen for Denali, male climbers are 37 years old and females are a little bit younger at 34, and that's similar for Everest. And so I dug into the Himalayan database. I'm kind of a statistical nerd in that respect. I spent a lot of time on the Himalayan database. If you don't know what that is, it was founded by Elizabeth Hawley in Kathmandu. She's since passed, but there's a team that manages that, and they interview the various expedition leaders and pull all the stats they keep. It's just a wonderful reservoir of data. But I went back and looked in 2008 for climbers between the ages of 50 and 59. So 2008, 50 to 59, they represented 7% of the summits. In 2019, for that same age group, 50 to 59, it more than doubled to 16%. And then looking at it for 2024, it was 18%. So it's really, the age group is growing over time. And we were talking about this and trying to figure out what was driving this. Well, part of it's got to be economics, that, it's just difficult in 2025 to end up, having disposable income when you're 25, 26, 27 years old. By the way, in 24, for people that were between the ages of 30 and 39, there were 120 summits out of the 370. So 30 to 49 is the dominant group. But people over 50, that is growing every single year. And another reason for that is that, people often joke about that all the comforts at base camp now on the mountain, calling it glamping, that, now that you've got, Climbing the Seven Summits is probably the leader in this. And they have, individual tents with cots that you're sleeping off the ground, which is becoming more and more common. So if you're over 50, those type of things, they don't become luxuries. They become something that you appreciate because it helps you to survive that overall experience. experience. So today, for Everest anyway, for 2024, the average age was 43 for men and 39 for women. But again, 18% of the summits were people over 50.
Really incredible. So this leads us to the age-old question that I'm going to let Dr. M take a stab at. You see it at the bottom there. If you're 50, if you're 60, are you too old to climb?
I started climbing when I was 12 and was a mountain guide for 15 years. And then I went to med school when I was 40 and then came back and did residency in ER and then came back. So went back to guiding again. My first time guiding on Everest, I was 52. And the first time I guided it successfully to the top, I was 53. And I've climbed 6 of the 7 summits over the age of 53. And it was fine. And the fact is, you're not too old to climb. People they don't slow down because they get old. They get old because they slow down. And as an older climber, you have so many advantages. At high altitude, it's never a good idea to move fast unless you're like trying to set a record, you're somebody like that. But in general, moving a little bit more slowly is better. I find that as I'm a little bit older, I'm much better strategically. I will actually get the extra sleep that I need. I will actually pay attention to my nutrition. I will actually, train for something and actually do what I meant to do. So I don't really think there is a too old to climb. And in my experience, there are huge advantages. And, too old for what? Like what? It's just a number, right? So I really don't think that number is that important. I do think planning ahead because, from a physiologic standpoint, there are some changes. There are some things that happen, as you age. You can lose muscle mass, like you will lose muscle mass if you do nothing about it. There are a few other things. Your VO2 max can decrease. It will over time. But those are just a couple of pieces of the puzzle. So the fact is, I don't feel any different than I did when I was in my 20s or 30s. But I also, I didn't pay attention to my nutrition and I didn't really train, and I stayed out late and stuff like that. So I think that even though these physiologic factors can change, I think that the other pieces of the puzzle make up for that. So you should just never limit yourself by your age. Plan ahead, do the right thing. And I can't say I'm a mature person yet, but a little more maturity will take you a long way in terms of being prepared to climb and being able to do it safely. So I just don't think there's a too old to climb, literally. My mom is 90 and she's like, will you take me up Mountaineer? I'm like, well, maybe if we have enough time.
I love it. So folks, the general idea is you're not too old to climb. Age is just a number. I know we were talking earlier that we often stay fit by continuing to move. We stay young by continuing to move. And that was just kind of like this resounding comment that we all had is by keeping moving, by doing all that, we can feel younger, we can keep climbing, we can keep moving forward. So one question that I want to ask Alan, do you have, and I'm putting you on the spot for statistics, so I'm sorry about that, any stats on hand for climbers over 60 on 8,000 meter peaks? Do you have any idea of the prevalence of that?
Yeah, I don't have the statistics off the top of my head. I can certainly look at the Himalayan database and send you a message with this. But in general, it really goes down. It's just a handful, probably under 15, that actually summit, maybe not climb, but summit 8,000 meter peaks when you're over 60. One thing that is a reality, though, and I don't want to be a bummer, the death rate is higher for people over 50 and 60 when you go climb these mountains. And a lot of times it's things that are just people just don't know. They're aneurysms or heart attacks, and the stress of altitude just brings those things out. So one of the things that I know the Climbing the Seven Summits does, if you're over 50, they ask you to get some type of a physical. And I would go further than that. I would say get a physical with a stress test and just really make sure that your body is in tip-top shape when you go.
Yep. Well, and so, if you have subclinical disease, it will be unmasked by altitude because it pushes you physiologically. Alan just said that people, over the age of 50 or 60 are more likely to die at altitude. Well, they're also more likely to die at sea level. And where would you like to? So just a thought. And I just wanted to mention about acclimatization. Well, a couple things. Acclimatization, it's a sort of a symphony. It's your lungs and your kidneys and your brainstem, all sort of working together to acclimatize. And acclimatizing as an older person, maybe just a little bit slower, but not a whole lot. you may be a little less likely to have altitude sickness, but there's no reason why you can't acclimatize at altitude. And always, we stick to that 300 meters a day of ascent. That's the standard. And if you do that and then take a rest day about every 4 days, 4 or 5 days, that is the standard. And I don't have any trouble acclimatizing. So I wouldn't worry about that. And then the other one, someone said, how do you handle knee arthritis at higher altitudes? I have had 4 knee surgeries. It's all original material, but they've been reconstructed a bunch of times. I am still climbing just fine. The answer to that is keep moving, and keep moving, and be strong. I saw also lifting weights and carrying a heavy pack uphill. And that's the key. If you want to protect your joints, which you do, because joints, they do wear out over time. If you treat them well, the best way to treat them well is to protect them with strong muscles. Recently, I had a dirt bike crash last fall and dinged up my knee. And my doc said, the reason you didn't blow your ACL is because your quads and your hammies were good and strong. So keep doing that. There's a lot of wisdom in that. Be consistent with your training, protect your joints, and keep moving. And that's the way to continue to climb it. Have yourself never be too old to climb.
Love it. Thank you for that. But I do want to push forward because we have been really kind of dancing around this idea that there are some really strong benefits. There are some things that are maybe not benefits that we're going to talk about next slide, but there are some really strong benefits to being a little bit older and being on the mountain. So the question at hand is, what's the value of being a little bit older? You might have more time. You might be retired. Alan alluded to that. You might have a little bit more money to work with, which is always a good thing. So that financial security, you have a good support network, or maybe your support network's changed. Eva's changed, which kind of led her to the mountains and, led her to all the things she's doing now. One thing that we really see, the humility, the understanding, the compassion, the number of you folks that said, I want to be with like-minded climbers. That's one of the biggest things that you bring. You bring wisdom and you bring experience. It is really true. It is something that we see in many of our older climbers, is just that humility and understanding and compassion. And then because you're getting a little bit older, you want to be training. You want to be consistent with your training. You want to have community. So those are all things that are working towards you. Those are the values we look for in the climbers at CTSS that we want to bring on our expeditions. Folks, I want to pass this off to Eva because I want her to talk a little bit about the benefits of becoming a mountaineer at a little bit of an older age and how this felt to you, Eva.
Absolutely. So I started my journey at age 59. Okay. So you're definitely not too old. I was 59 when I started my journey. And when I look back, when you go through life, you have family, you have responsibility, you have work, you give to them. And what I realized as I got older, now it's time I can give to myself. And I will make time for that. Because as we get older, we know we only have so much time left on this amazing planet. And the experience that we have gained through life, I think, makes you stronger on the mountain mentally than a younger climber, because you know yourself and you know your strengths and weaknesses. And I think that actually is a benefit for an older climber on the mountain. When I'm on the mountain, I become very humble because the mountains are very big, but I am right in the moment and I experience the climbs and I dig deep no matter how painful it is, because I know my experience in my life has brought me here and I see that as a benefit. So as you get older, you bring that with you. And so I definitely think the other part is, as you get older, you know you need to set baby goals, baby steps to achieve your big goal. Do a smaller mountain, do a smaller climb, and then get to the bigger climb, because from experience, you need to do that. To get to a bigger goal, you have to have baby steps. Don't just look for the big one. I didn't look at Everest when I was on Denali or at Everest Base Camp. That came later. So there's baby steps to get there. And I think that comes with experience and being older. And so, yeah, that's for me really important.
Amazing. Eva has just done a fabulous job of really painting her why, what brings her to the mountain, this kind of slowing down of life, experiencing life, and taking those baby steps and being able to just kind of slow down a little bit and take things bit by bit and challenge by challenge. And I think that's really neat. Alan, I know you've spoke at length and you have this really strong passion. We've also done a webinar on mindset where we talked a lot about the why. But Alan, can you just quickly mention and just kind of bring to light the importance, that last bullet point, we say something about the why.
I had this consulting business called Summit Coach, and where I, just work with people that want to either climb bigger mountains or different mountains or get into the sport. But regardless of what their goal is, in the first call, we spend at least half of that time talking about why. And I have this little speech that I give, and I'll give a very, very abbreviated version of it. But the why is important because you're going to hit the wall. And I don't really care if you're 20 years old, 40, 60, 80 years old. Like at some point on these expeditions, again, whether it's Rainier or Everest or K2 or Cotopaxi, you're going to hit some type of a wall, physical or mental. And if you don't know what your why is, it's just too easy to turn around. Mm-hmm. And when I ask people this question, their answers range from, Alan, it's none of your business, to, I want to get rich and famous, write a book, go on the speaking circuit and sell t-shirts, and I want to become famous. And you know what? It doesn't matter what the answer is. All it matters is that you know yourself why you're on that mountain, why you're going through that experience, so that when you do hit the wall, you can dig deep and you can go back to that why. Now, it may not get you to the summit if you're struggling, if you've hit the wall. And, and there's a difference between being hurt and hurting. If you're hurting, you can just push through it. If you're hurt, like you've got altitude sickness or, you sprained an ankle or something like that, clearly you need to go down. But digging deep into that why gives you the strength, and you can tap into that inner strength, both mentally, mental toughness, and your physical strength to at least take one more step higher. And at that point, you can make an informed decision about whether to go higher or whether to go lower. But for me, all the motivation, including while you're training, starts with why are you doing this? And you need to be crystal clear on what that why is. Finally, you don't need to justify your why to anybody on this planet. All you need to do is to make sure that you deep down know why you're doing what you're doing, and that way you can achieve your maximum potential.
Wonderful, Alan. I'm imagining Eva on the mountain and thinking, this is a slow process. This is the experience. This is the journey I wanted. And it's the fact that she's there for that experience that helps her put one foot in front of the other on the mountain. So I think that's really neat. Bottom line is we do want to really make it crystal clear that it's an affirmatively good thing that you're older. It's not a bad thing. It is a good thing. And again, that's the picture that we're really trying to paint here. We do want to look at the other side of the coin. It is good to understand what are some of the concerns. And if you notice, this list is a little bit smaller to start out with. We had trouble coming up with more concerns than not, and that's not done intentionally. This is what we kind of as a group talked about and put out there. So the first one that I want to talk about is pacing and going slow. Would anyone like to talk a little bit more about pacing and, as an older mountaineer, how pacing feels to you in the mountains?
I actually would like to kind of chime in on this one. So what I notice when I'm on the mountain and we start the morning or we start the climb, the roughest time for me is the first hour. I have a really tough time getting my rhythm and pacing my steps and my breathing. And then after about an hour, I slowly get into my rhythm. And I don't know if it has to do with age. I have no idea. But that's just the experience that I have. So now mentally, I'm prepared and I am really focused on my breathing and on my steps as we start out of the camp.
I think Eva's got a great plan. And the thing is to have it be Zen. So to get to the point where your breathing and your steps are in a rhythm. And then stress will crush you. Stress will suck all your energy away. But what Eva's talking about is you just get into this rhythm, and it's like the mountain climbs itself. When you get to that point where you're relaxed, your steps and your breathing are in rhythm. And the next thing you know, you're another 1,000 feet higher.
So something that goes hand in hand with pacing, because sometimes it's like a mental thing just in you. You're like, oh, I'm going slow. It's really hard right now at the beginning. Eva, I'm like you. I'm a slow start. And then once I'm burning and churning, I'm like, whoo, here we go. But the other side of that is sometimes it's not so internal. Sometimes you're comparing yourself to others. The younger climber that's going way faster, not breathing hard. And you're like, oh, heavens me, what is going on? Alan, I think you might be a good one to talk about comparing yourself to others.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest issues that older climbers have, is that they'll go at a slower pace. But they'll see, the young stud flying up the mountain, or the guide, or if you're climbing with support, like in Nepal, you'll see a Sherpa that just didn't feel like they're even breathing hard. And that can be a mind game. So you really got to just play your own game and not compete against anybody else. And I always say, find your pace that you can keep all day long. If you're hyperventilating, you can't carry on a conversation, you're probably going too fast. So you really just got to maintain that control. And I had this little mantra that I use in the mountains, especially on an 8,000-meter mountains, is short, simple steps. Short, simple steps. And just go and get in your pace and get into your own world and just forget everybody else. You'll hear about turnaround times on a lot of mountains, and that is for your own safety. But also that can be, just like Dr. M was talking about, that can create stress in your body. And so if you end up just, worrying about all this stuff, about you're going to be the last one coming into camp, or, oh my gosh, I didn't make it by the turnaround time, or I didn't make it on this time that they said I should make it on. That's really what the guide is there for. And hopefully you're climbing with a guide that you can actually be open and honest and candid with and talk about your pacing. And, some people go slower than others, and that is perfectly fine. Just make sure that you're surrounding yourself with like-minded people. And if you got people that are, running up and down the mountain, good for them. But don't let them change the way that you play your game.
Awesome. So, folks, what we're kind of realizing is that some of these things are in our mind, which means that some of these issues are perceived concerns. They're not always real reality concern that's happening. It's just something that's up here that we're feeling worried about. And we're going to talk in a moment a lot about how to train your mindset before your actual trek or your expedition. But I want to hear a little bit from Dr. M about some of these perceived threats, and specifically really about like acclimatization perceived threats and things like that. So I want to make sure you get a chance to talk about that and really jump into which ones of these might be just in our minds and coming from the guide perspective too.
A lot about being a mountain guide is, I always say it's good practice for motherhood, because you're, telling people to zip up their coat, wipe their nose, eat something, put their hood up, that kind of stuff. And then also, there are a lot of times, so many times, because I mostly train military teams, and these are people that are super high powered and very athletic and driven. And reining them in is the hardest thing I do as a guide, is to just slow them down, because that super fast pace is not going to be beneficial for you. My main adventure partner is 23 years younger than me. And many times we've done all kinds of adventures all over the planet. And I'm, start slow and taper off, that's my strategy. And so 4 or 5 hours into the adventure, I'm still just chugging along and she's starting to poop out. So I think the pacing thing, people are nervous about it. There's ego involved. I mean, if you're on Strava, Strava is this whole thing where everybody's trying to go faster and one up each other. You want to tap into the wisdom of your age where you really don't care what other people think about you. You can go, and just start slow, and they can blow by you, and that's fine. You know that you're going to see them a few hours later. The going too fast is what makes you prone to injury. And on a long, like an Everest climb, I mean, you're talking about 60, 70 days up there. Man, those people that start off at a run are really going to poop out. So just know that is the wisdom of the tortoise. Hold on to that. It will really make a difference. I used to do like full length adventure races back in the day, like Eco Challenge, and the gun would go off. This is like a 350-mile race, and the gun would go off at the start, and some teams would like sprint across, the starting line. Like, what are you thinking? So it's that same philosophy here. You are wise to go slow, and a good guide will rein in the group and have people go slow. And that's a really hard thing to do as a guide, but do not doubt the wisdom of going at a nice, even, slow pace. So train at that pace and move at that pace, and don't be concerned what other people think of you, because they're going to be dragging their ass into camp 5 days down the line when you're going to be already there, having a hot chocolate and smiling. So don't let your ego get in the way of that. I also saw a lot of questions about altitude acclimatization. This is like more from the literature. Training and being aerobically fit will help you perform better at altitude. There is a strong genetic component to altitude acclimatization, but that you can't really change except by going to altitude over and over again. There's evidence that there are some durable changes that happen. So the more you go to altitude, the more you will be able to go to altitude without trouble. I don't think there's anything that shows a significant difference that you are slower to acclimatize when you're older. You just want to do the same thing. I know that people are, doing these like rapid ascents and stuff like that. That's fine. You can do that. But honestly, human physiology doesn't really support that. So people that are doing that and pushing the envelope are the ones that get in trouble. So that 300 meters, 1,000 feet a day, just stick to that. And ahead of time, talk with your guide and be like, hey, what's our ascent profile? Find out what it is. And a lot of times when I'm guiding, if I have older clients, I love that. because I'll have them as my anchors up front. I'll be like, yeah, we're going at this pace and we're going to win. We're going to get to camp. We're going to feel like $1,000,000. We're going to get up and do it again tomorrow. And so don't be self-conscious about that. It is not a race.
So folks, you've heard it. Eva, Alan, Dr. M, all really stressing that pace, it's a reasonable thing. Lots of people feel stress about pace. Lots of people feel it in their egos and their minds, and that's okay. We are here with you. We understand that, but we are trying to express that it's an asset when you are going a little bit slower, and really encouraging you to bring the wisdom of not caring at all, because you're old enough to kind of stop caring what people think. Trying to apply that to the mountain is really good. And then Dr. M kind of demystifying a little bit of the acclimatization. Our genetics play a massive role. We can't change that. But ultimately, when you're acclimatizing and you're going up to altitude, there's not a lot of differences when your age is factored in. Your guides do make a difference, though. The pace at which you're going with your guide, with your team, does matter. So talk to your guide outfitter. What is the pace? What is your acclimatization schedule? How are you working this? Because that's going to build trust. And then you're going to know, oh, this is what we want to do. This is a slower acclimatization pace, and that feels good. Right here, we have our Kilimanjaro trek, and that is one that we really are proud of because we run it slower. If you look at our timeline, it's 10 days on the Mashame route, and that is slower than a lot of other trek operators are going to go on different routes, and they're going to get you up there faster, but you might get altitude sickness up there. So talking to your guide and your guide outfitter when you're exploring different options to understand how they work with acclimatization and how they prioritize it is really important. There's a couple more questions coming in here. Any that we want to jump into now?
Well, there's just one about Raynaud's. And so I have Raynaud's and I have not yet had frostbite. And I think the bottom line with Raynaud's is to keep your core warm. Keep that core warm and your fingers and toes will stay warm. So if fingers and toes are getting cold, it means you need to put more on your body. You need to eat some more calories. It is technically, yes, it's a risk factor for having cold injury. But in reality, you know how it works. Like my fingers get cold when I walk into the frozen section of the grocery store, right? But if your core is warm, you will do fine. The other thing about Raynaud's is if you get in your sleeping bag at night, your feet are cold, they will not wake up overnight. Like if you go to bed with your feet cold from Raynaud's, they will stay that way all night long. So you need to get a hot water bottle and put it down at the bottom of your sleeping bag, or go down there with your hands and physically warm just 1 foot up. And when you warm that 1 foot up, you'll feel the floodgate open for the other foot as well. So just managing Raynaud's, it's not something that should be an impediment to your climbing.
I've got a pair of really, really cozy alpaca socks, and I only sleep in them on an expedition. That's the only time they go on my feet. And that way, along with the Nalgene with hot water in it, they'll get cold feet.
Yeah, and the cold feet thing, it's really the core. Putting bigger gloves on hands that are cold because your core is warm isn't going to help. Your blood is being shunted away from your core. So warm that core up. If you have sweaty, wet stuff, take it off. Wet sports bra, take that off. Wet base layer, take that off. And so you get dry, warm stuff next to your core.
One more question about pace is how do you have your own appropriate pace when you're on a rope team like in Denali? And my simple thought is that be the first person on the rope. By definition, you're going to control the pace. But more importantly is try to get roped up with other people that have similar paces to yours. And again, don't get in competition.
So we want to move forward. We're now going to jump into a lot of fitness training, mental preparation, nutrition, and then wrap up with acclimatization. So we're going to spend a little time talking about that. We got Dr. M Flex in there. It looks like a younger self there. It was one of the pictures you sent me. So I had
that was 1991. That was my first guiding session on Denali. And you can look at my pack. It's bigger than
look at that pack. Holy mom.
That was yard sale.
Yeah, just all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
It was too good that it needed to be on this. So folks, as you get a little bit older, of course, you're going to feel different as you recover from exercise. It becomes noticeable once you hit your 40s, 45 or so, and you might feel your recovery slow down. So we want to give you some tips today for fitness training and kind of moving ahead with a fitness plan. Just from the CTSS side, whenever you sign up for an expedition, we always give you a expedition-specific fitness training plan designed by Lisa Thompson. They're really incredible plans, and they're designed for all of our climbers that are going on these treks and on these expeditions. Folks, you might then work with Lisa or contact our team or even work with somebody like Alan to learn how should I modify this because I am an older mountaineer. And that is okay. That's okay to modify it a little bit and find what works best. We're going to give you some suggestions now, and I'm going to have Alan kick it off because he's going to lead the charge on don't overcomplicating it and really thinking about what are the core things you need to do as an older mountaineer. But I'm going to give a chance for each of our panelists to speak on fitness training because I know this is just something that they're all passionate about. So Alan, can you tell us a little bit about this concept of not overcomplicating your training plan?
In my mind, it's really pretty simple. Let me give you very, very brief background. I didn't start climbing until I was 38, as I said earlier. And the way I trained, well, I had a full-time job. I was traveling all the time. So what I would do is go to the hotel gym, get on the treadmill or the stationary bike, maybe work out for an hour, maybe go for maybe a half an hour run in the hotel area. And you know what? I got to the mountain and it kicked my butt. I was nowhere nearly prepared like I should be. And so what I changed over time is that I started spending long, sustained days in the mountains. When I say long, 4, 6, 8 hours, and gaining as much elevation as you can. There was a question about what if you live at sea level and you're not near any mountains? Well, if you have a tall building, you can go up and down the staircase. And I also recommend going down as much as you go up. I think it's a myth that says that, put water bottles in your pack and empty it at the top to save your knees coming down. I lost my ACL when I was 18 years old, and I've been able to climb without having an ACL in my right knee, and I've had meniscus repair in my left knee. They get more tender as you get older, but the key is you got to keep moving. That's the point. And just spending as much time as you can. If you live like it that's on a coast and you have a beach that you can go doing some good jogging in the sand, what you want to do is to work those micro muscles and micro ligaments in your ankles and your hips. You don't get that type of workout when you're on a stationary bike or you're on a treadmill. Versa climbers and jumps are really good where you're working your whole body. You can gain that elevation. But the best thing is that don't be a slave to your Garmin watch. Don't let the Garmin tell you if you had a good day or a bad day. What I recommend is that you go out and you do these long sustained days. One final tip. I call them the back-to-back days, is that you go on one day, let's say you go do a 4-hour climb or hike, whatever it is, come back to the car, get some more calories and some water and electrolytes to replace the minerals that you're losing, and then go do that same 4 hours again. Now, you've done it twice in one day. Now, keep a journal of that. And on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being I can do it again right now, I could do it a third time, or 1 being I got to go to bed. So whatever the number is, it's your number. So you write that down and you keep track of this over several months, especially if you're like a year out training for a big climb. Now, you do that back to back once a month. And every couple of months, on one day, you do 8 hours, and the next day, you do another 8 hours. And then again, you write in your journal, how did I recover? Because what we're looking at here is your recovery time. It's not what your Apple Watch says or your Garmin or your Strava, it's how you feel. And you're the best one to gauge how you feel. And the metric that we're going for here is how are you recovering?
Yeah, wonderful. So I want to pass over to Eva one question. Did you do Denali, Aconcagua, Everest first because those require more strength and are more technical and you're doing it in reverse order? And then we're also would love to hear how you're preparing for Everest in real life and applying what Alan just shared to your training plan.
Definitely, that's a great question. And thanks for bringing that up in regards to the order of my summits. So I started my summit journey at age 61. And so I knew that the older I get, the harder it's going to be to do hard mountains, high mountains. So I decided to reverse the order as much as I can, do the harder peaks first, and then leave the easier peaks towards the end. So I knew Denali would be physically very challenging, and it is a very challenging mountain, and Aconcagua, almost 23,000. So I decided to do those and then jump into Everest after that. So I hope that answered that question.
I was wondering that and appreciate you sharing that.
I would say, Alan, you pretty much hit it right on the nail, how to train for high peaks. And for me personally, I really focus on cardio, endurance, and that means maybe going for long runs. And the endurance also is carrying a heavy pack. And when I say heavy pack, it could be 45 pounds going up a steep climb, on a mountain. Also, strength, as females especially, we don't have as much, I would say, muscle mass and strength. So I focus on working on that so I'm stronger. But the one thing that I have found getting older also is mobility and being flexible is so important when you're on the mountain, because you're walking. You don't just have to be strong in your legs, but you have to be able, if you miss a step, that you balance back. And as we get older, we do lose our balance more than younger climbers. So I think flexibility and working on mobility is important, and you can incorporate different movements in the gym to help with that. And then I really like also what Alan said, the recovery. Yes, I have a watch, but I listen to my body. I listen, okay, how did I feel coming back down? And how do I feel tonight? Is my body recovering? And then also getting enough rest. In addition to that, hydration and proper nutrition. Without that, you're not going to be able to recover. And going towards Everest, I know there are going to be massive long days. I feel at this point, physically, I've done what I can do to get ready and I feel pretty strong. But when I get there, my success rate is going to increase if I have proper hydration, nutrition, and then recovery as best as I can, which is very hard to do, even at base camp, which is just shy of 18,000 feet. So that's kind of what I focus on for my Everest climb.
Wonderful. We love hearing how you kind of take what Alan was just sharing, put it into practice, long days in the mountain, not getting too addicted to your Strava times, recording yourself, your perceived efforts. It's so interesting to see that over time. But we've heard from Alan, we've heard from Eva, how we can not overcomplicate things, keep things simple, remain flexible, work on our mobility as we should be kind of as we're getting older. But now we want to hear from Dr. M. It's her chance to give us a physiological overview of what is really happening in your body as you get older. And then we had a question about, men versus women. And so if there's any tidbits for women and men, especially as estrogen and testosterone levels tend to change a little bit as we hit certain ages.
Yeah, well, there are differences between men and women and between old people and young people, for sure. But, you can't use that as an excuse. So the deal is there is what we call sarcopenia, where about 10% loss of muscle mass per decade, supposedly. But the fact is, you can counter that by regular weight training, regular training, like Eva was talking about. How do you train to climb mountains? Climb mountains. And if you live near the beach, then climb the headlands with a heavy pack and just do it over and over again. Whatever it is that you need, what you want to do is train. You want a high fidelity simulation environment for the environment in which you are going to perform. So yeah, you can be on the elliptical trainer, but what is elliptical? Like, what is that motion? What is that? When do you do that out in the world? It's not like a 100% normal movement. So do what you are going to do when you're climbing. Carry the pack so that your balance is good. And then flexibility is important and balance is important. Train as similarly as you can to the environment you're going to be in. Obviously, you're not going to be training at, 23,000 feet if you're living in this country, but that is absolutely key. And don't overcomplicate it. You can get these complex big mountain training programs with all this stuff. But the bottom line is, if you just go out and hike up and down things with a heavy pack on, and hike down also, because the wheels come off on the way back down. You need that eccentric muscle contraction. You need to train with your pack on the way down. Don't pound your knees, but be able to walk downhill with that heavy pack as well as uphill. Because I can tell you, when I'm guiding, it is on the way down that the wheels come off, because everybody gets on a stair climber and, walks all day long on that. And then they try to walk downhill, and that is a different set of muscles. So high fidelity simulation environment is what you want. And that's so simple. In terms of testosterone and estrogen, yes, we age, our bodies change. That is absolutely true. And the question is, yeah, you can do estrogen replacement, you can do testosterone, everybody's into low T, there's all this stuff. But the fact is, consistent training, good sleep hygiene, and excellent nutrition will overcome these things to the greatest degree possible. We are going to age. We are all constantly heading towards the grave. Like, there's no doubt about that, right? But it's not something that you need to stress out about. Just consistent training. I didn't train when I was younger. I didn't do any training. I just climbed these things, right? Now I train, I'm smart about it. So I feel pretty much the same as I did before, because now I'm smart about it. And that's the key. It is not exercise or stress that makes you stronger. It is sleep that makes you stronger. It is good nutrition. Get the protein. I shoot for 0.8 to 1 grams of protein per pound per day, which is a lot. And I'm a vegetarian, so that's even more. But do that, get plenty of protein in your diet. Use a collagen supplement. Creatine, you can use that. That is one of the few supplements that's shown to help with muscle mass. That's like it. That's all of it. I just hit the ones. Glucosamine and chondroitin can help with your knees, that we know. So that's about it, though. There are a million other supplements and complex training programs. Yeah, testosterone, estrogen, they'll drop. But if you are smart about your training and get 8 hours of sleep a night, golly, I shoot for 8 to 10 every night. That's what I shoot for. Do I get it? Always no, but that's what you shoot for. And that, I think, is what helps make me stronger, is that I'm a powerful sleeper. So just those simple things. And it's so frustrating, right? It's exactly what your grandma told you, right? Eat well, sleep well. There's no magic bullet at this point. So keep it simple. You're aging, but just be smarter as you age, and you will be able to perform at altitude at the same level. You'll be able to climb with people that are much younger than you.
Dr. M, thank you for sharing all that. And so, folks, don't overcomplicate it is a resounding theme with the fitness training. But I am wanting to just give a little bit of attention, a very specific concern from somebody. The ultimate thing is just go to your doctor, and you're going to want to talk to them. Dr. M's giving us great advice, but go and get that advice from your doctor if you're really worried about something, if you've got an ailment or something going on, you're managing that, you're going to want to use that. And this is, again, why we also have anyone over 50 or anyone going above 8,000 meters, you always do a medical test and cardiac testing as well, because we want you to touch base with your doctor just a little bit.
So there are two things. So what Stephanie's talking about is if you have some kind of, and disease processes happen as you get older. So don't forget about that. Don't pretend, if you know that you have some heart disease or you have this or that, these limitations, go to your doctor and manage them as well as you can. That being said, a lot of physicians are afraid of altitude. A lot of physicians don't understand altitude. And most physicians, during my medical education, I got 2 hours of nutrition training. And I'm not talking 2 credit hours. I got 120 minutes of nutrition training. I went to a great medical school. So asking them about training and fitness and nutrition, most of your physicians are not the person to ask about. The other thing is they're often afraid of altitude because most physicians don't understand altitude. So it's not this big, bad, ugly thing that's going to kill you. So do talk to your physician about if you have underlying heart disease, if you have high blood pressure and high cholesterol risk factors, and definitely get checked out because altitude will stress your body more physiologically. And if you have subclinical disease, it will unmask it. So just make sure, EKG, stress test, don't go to them and just say, hey, I'm worried about this. What do I need to do? And so they will let them drive that. But at the same time, remember that most physicians don't really understand altitude and don't understand the stresses there. So just make sure that they know it's going to be a physiologically stressful environment. Is there anything I need to worry about? Is there anything you want to think about ahead of time? The fact is, climbing with a guide service, a respected guide service, is the safest way you can go into these mountains. Climbing Mount Everest with a respected guide service like CTSS is the safest. There are so many resources around. There are so many people around. There are Sherpas, there are guides, there are all kinds of people giving you information on what to do, keeping an eye on you, observing you. That is the safest way that you can go to altitude. And that is absolutely what I recommend. But just know that there are some physicians that are terrified of altitude and don't understand it. And they may just tell you not to go to altitude at all. So I'm not saying blow off what your doctor says, but tell them, is there anything I should worry about? Whatever test, you're concerned about, let's, test and make sure I'm good to go and push it at a higher stress level than normal. And once you get that checked out, then you can do your fitness training.
That was perfect. Thank you, Dr. M, for clarifying that. So folks, I think that's really important. If you got something underlying, you of course are going to talk to your doctor about that. And we do have doctors testing, but we do know that their limitation of knowledge is sometimes there, which is okay. One thing I want to just keep a little nugget in the back of your mind, Dr. M was stressing the importance of sleep over and over. And I want you to just remember this as we continue to go forward. We are moving on to mental prep and mindset prep. This is, honestly, one of the most important parts. I think Caroline, co-owner of CTSS, says over and over again, one of the biggest reasons people fail in the mountains is their mindset. So if you notice, we keep talking about during the expedition mindset, like, oh, I'm slow. Oh, I'm feeling bad because these younger people are just cruising past me. But the truth is a lot of what we do for mindset happens before the expedition. And so Alan's going to give us a little talk through about how you can prepare your mindset before your expedition. So when you're on your expedition, you can be like Eva and live that quote, I dance with fear and embrace risk to your fullest. So Alan, I'm going to pass it back off to you to give us a little overview of pre-expedition prep.
So I kind of tie this back into the training in that when you're thinking about your expedition, your climb, again, regardless of what it is, if it's Alpe Mayo or Amanda Blanc or Rainier, is that every time you go out for a training session, have a goal in mind, train with a purpose. So it could be that, for example, if you're going to go to Denali, having fast, efficient, or Rainier, fast, efficient, effective breaks is really important. So when you go out for that climb, if you're with friends, tell them, hey, today instead of us, stopping and talking for 30 minutes a break, let's try to keep it to 10 minutes only. And, you follow the whole routine, take the pack off and, put the jacket on, eat, drink, reverse it, go. Fast, efficient breaks. Train with a purpose. But one of the big things you can do while you're training is visualize. And so I know that, when I went to Everest 4 times. I only summited once, but I became to know what I needed to do. So when I was training here in Colorado, I would think about going up the Lhotse face. And because that's a pretty interesting section of climbing Everest. You're looking for the little buckets that you can put your feet in as you're going up with your crampons. You've got your Jumar on the fixed rope and you're moving, again, short, simple steps. And you're going up that thing. Well, here in Colorado, when I would go up in Long's Peak in January, there's snow up there and the wind is blowing like crazy. So I would say, okay, you're on the Lhotse face now. And I would visualize being there. I also was afraid of the heights. So again, very briefly, the way I cured it was I was doing some tramping down in New Zealand and went to the H.A. Hackett over the Kokura Bridge and watched people bungee jump off the bridge. When I watched them bungee jump, literally my hands would get sweaty. I would get my heart would start going. I would just go crazy, sort of like that stress response that Dr. Im was talking about earlier. So what I did while I was trekking through New Zealand, I would visualize them tying the towel around my ankles, tying the rope onto it, walking to the end of the gangplank and going 3, 2, 1, bungee, and I'd jump off. Every time I would visualize that, I would go through the same physiological responses. But I did it enough to where I became very comfortable with it. So when the time came to do the bungee jump, 3, 2, 1 bungee, I did a perfect swan dive off the bridge. Luckily, the rope held. But it's visualization. If you visualize what your biggest fear is on the mountain, be it pace, be it, old knees, be it bad back, being in competition with somebody, visualize those situations. And so own that fear. And then you're going to build that mental toughness the more and more that you do it. Another thing is for mindset, put yourself out there while you're training. Go for a bike ride in the middle of the night when it's raining and cold. Yeah, it sucks. But what you're doing is you're helping your body understand that you're not too old to suffer. But my adage is let's suffer lower so that you suffer less higher. You're still going to suffer, but you can minimize that suffering by putting yourself through the mill down low.
Yeah. Alan, thank you for that. So Alan visited Everest 4 times, stood on the top once. Visualization is what he's saying was the key to help unlock that summit for him. Eva, I know you've been to Denali more than once. And so I'd love to have you share a little bit about your experience on Denali and especially with the mindset side of things and how this felt for you in actuality.
So yes, I love to dance with fear and embrace risk. I attempted Denali for the first time in 2023. And I trained really hard for the whole year, paid for the expedition. And the expedition went really well. And we got up to 14,000 camp, which is the main big camp before you go up to the high camp. And that year, Denali had really bad weather. The success rate for summit was really low. And we were at 14,000 and we were stuck there for a few days. And then our lead guide said, we're going to have to turn around. We don't have a window to summit Denali. When I heard that, my whole world crumbled. Here I am, trained for a year, and I felt so strong and ready to go all the way to the summit. And I was told, we're not going to the summit, we're getting off the mountain. I was angry, frustrated, disappointed. And then I said, you know what? You got to step aside and realize it's not about the summit. It's about the journey. It's about the journey to learn about yourself, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and what did you learn on this climb? And I'm getting emotional right now just talking about it because it was really hard because that was my first high mountain. And I thought, I'm going to summit every mountain that I'm going to attempt. I'm never going to turn around. But the mountain didn't open the gate, didn't invite me up. So I had to go back down. And as I was going down, I was actually thankful because I was safe. And I learned what food not to bring because I brought food for the first time on a mountain like that. I could not eat. I learned more about my strengths with the gear and what I needed to work on to be even more prepared. So for me, it was not a disappointment. It was still a successful climb because it's about the journey. And the other thing is, when we came to base camp where you fly off, we had to wait 4 days before a plane could come in and pick us up. We felt like we were stranded on an island and we had to ration our food because we didn't have enough food. And that was mentally really tough because you couldn't even walk outside the camp. You were kind of stuck right by the tent and you just had to wait. So I did a lot of meditation and just being in the moment and being grateful that I was safe. The one thing on every climb that I learned, though, especially when you have something like that happen, is what did I learn that I can take back into my personal life and into my business? And I do bring things back and I become a better person all around by having this experience. So when you do attempt a summit, remember, it's about the journey. It's not about standing up top. It's all about the journey.
A wonderful playbook to follow, folks. First of
Yeah.
all, she's letting us all know that you can do this. You can start at, she started at 60, I think 61, realizing her why, understanding that, moving that towards the mountain. And then it sounds like, visualizing tough things. So if turning around is going to be your tough thing, you can start to visualize that and think about that happening. So if it does happen, you'll be mentally tough, you'll be resilient to it, and then you can turn around and then look at your why, look at your journey, whatever your why is, and start to see the other things that have happened in your life and how you can apply this summit attempt to all the other pieces of your life.
So I wanted to go back to Alan, where he's talking about visualizing. For me, visualizing Everest, I've watched so many documentaries. I know every single section of that mountain, from base camp to 1, which is the Khumbu Ice Fall, 1 to 2, all the way. And I've been visualizing every single section when I'm faced with something really hard that I need to overcome. And I visualize that I'm overcoming it. And so I think visualizing is so, so important when you do these climbs.
I just want to mention, like Eva was talking about getting stuck at base camp, or getting stuck at 14 camp or 17 or whatever. But the fact is, what a cool place, right? I mean, she wasn't sitting at Kehiltna base going, man, I wish I was sitting in my car on I-5 stuck in traffic right now, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Some people, their whole Alaskan trip, they do a sightseeing flight and they land at Kehiltna base and get out for 5 minutes and then fly back. And there you're there for 4 days and it's beautiful. Like Forker's there and Hunter and like all the stuff. So don't forget where you are. It's so cool. And you have a limited amount of time on the planet, right? So how do you want to spend the minutes and the hours and the days of your life, right? If you're disappointed about not getting to the summit, I get it. But there's some people that don't have a roof over their head, and have, food insecurity. And here you're on some mountain and you're stuck and boo-hoo, you didn't get to go to the top, but you're in this cool place with these cool people. So don't forget to be grateful for the experience in every moment for the experience. That's the key.
I love that. Well, Eva, you gave us a little lead into our next topic. You said on Denali that you brought food that you had never eaten before, which is not always fun. You see, number 1 there is train with your nutrition plan. That's the first thing we have up there. Bring snacks you love. Eva, can you tell us how your nutrition has evolved and what you're doing for Everest? Because you're heading there soon. So what does nutrition look like for you now?
So I'm definitely focusing just to get ready for Everest. My nutrition is, lots of protein, carbs. I'm watching my iron. I do full blood test before I go. I had 2 ready and I watch my iron to make sure that's where it is. But the funny thing is, yesterday for like 3 hours, I ordered all my nutrition for Everest. Because when you're on the mountain, you want to make sure that you have everything that's very handy and that also gives you what you need. So I have gels that give me carbs, different items that bring me protein, drinks that have high calorie carbs so I can have high calories intake when I'm higher on the mountain. I'm taking probiotics with me, but making sure that I have enough, like from base camp to one to two, that I have enough for each climb. So I kind of planned it out. And then when I'm on the mountain, I'm going to have everything in Ziploc. Okay, this is for camp 2. This is for camp 3. So I have everything planned out. On Denali, I didn't really know, and I brought things that didn't taste good up there. And the thing is, you got to bring it back down so it's in your pack or in your sled. You can't just leave it up there. So I think it's just being on the mountain multiple times to understand what your body can digest. What my body can digest may be different what Alan can digest. And you want to make sure you try the items at home when you train so you know how it tastes, how it feels. Is your body taking it well? Because up in the mountain, your digestive system is going to be even more sensitive. Yeah, so I spent a lot of time yesterday to get everything that I need for the climb.
Perfect. And I do want to just draw attention. This is Eva on the summit of Aconcagua here, putting her nutrition plan to good practice just recently. And then this is Dr. M mixing up something delicious here. I know a couple people have asked about our favorite drink mixes, supplements, but reaffirming what Eva just said, what you like is going to be different than what I like. I know I like Element and Tailwind, but my partner is like, ugh. Element's gross and does not like it at all. And everyone has something different. But what I do want to do, since we got Dr. M here, is really dive into her medical knowledge and talk about how nutrition needs change. Eva gave a couple of little tidbits. Iron, probiotics are what she's keeping her eye on. And you already said, Dr. M, protein is important. But let's just give a nice little overview from your perspective as a medical professional. How does the nutrition look different as you get older?
So we do not assimilate protein as well, it seems. That's what the data seems to show. So shooting for 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per pound per day is a good thing. That's something, if you have kidney disease, you want to maybe run that by your doc first. But that is a good thing to shoot for. Having enough protein for your body and realizing that it's not going to be 100% available. So high quality protein as well. That is super important. Iron is the only real supplement that's been shown to benefit you at altitude. Altitude acclimatization, you do increase your red blood cell mass. There are hundreds or thousands of things that happen as you acclimatize at altitude. That is just one of them. And that's why you can use the hypoxia tents, but that's just one of many, many things. But having enough iron to make a bunch of new red blood cells is key. You want to make sure that you don't have hemochromatosis or some other kind of iron storage disease. So you would ask your doc about that. And then, appropriate supplementation. And so iron is helpful, and that's going to be how much you supplement is going to be different. If you're male, if you're premenopausal female or postmenopausal female, your iron intake is going to need to be a little bit different. And then probiotics help you. Probiotics, we're finding, affect all kinds of things. They affect how you process food. They affect your mental status, and your probiotic environment in your body changes over time, and it should. And people that are obese have a different probiotic environment than people that are not obese. People that are older have a different probiotic environment, and we don't know a lot about it. But using a probiotic is a great idea. You can just do the little probiotic tabs. That's fine. Just make sure that they're high quality. I'm a big fan of kombucha and kimchi and stuff like that, fermented foods like beer, but not up high. So the other thing is women do better than men at altitude in terms of calorie burning. And so women are more efficient at altitude. And I just always talk about, like I did in 2016 when I was guiding up there were a couple buddies that I was guiding with. We all had the same ascent profile. They came in at maybe 175, one of them, and the other one was maybe 190 or something like that. And over the course of the expedition, they each lost 26 pounds, and I gained a pound doing exactly the same thing. There is an advantage. Women do have an advantage at altitude. The other thing is, every day when I'm up there, I eat a protein bar, 20 grams of protein once or twice a day. And I get one that I really just like the flavor, and I just make sure I eat one of those every day. So in terms of nutrition, the other thing is this is not a weight loss, and people will come to Rainier and they'll bring sawdust bars. And I'm like, really? You want to eat that? Why don't you bring some pizza? Why don't you bring some Snickers bars? Because this is the moment in time from a nutritional standpoint where you just want to bring all of your guilty pleasures. This is the only time where you can wake up at 2 a.m. and be like, oh, I'm kind of hungry, and house a king size Snickers bar and feel good about yourself and go back to sleep. That's where you get to do this. High up, you don't really process protein, and fat gets harder and harder to metabolize or to digest. When I'm way up high, the pockets of my down suit, I just carry those little, it's like a fake orange slice. It's probably just straight up corn syrup rolled in sugar. And I'll have those in the pockets of my down suit, something that you can put in your mouth and thaw if it's frozen. So it's small enough, like a fun size Snickers bar. Basically, you're eating rocket fuel up high. So those are just some thoughts on nutrition, but it's not a weight loss thing. Eat whenever you want to and bring stuff, or tell your guide service that you want these things because you love them. I am lucky because I don't really lose my appetite at altitude. And I remember being like at the South Call, we had MREs up there and like my friends are eating them. And I'm like, hey, if you're not going to finish that, like I'll eat the rest of that. And then finally, people will say, I'll be like, well, at a break, I'll say, okay, what did you eat? Did you eat something? And they're like, well, I didn't feel like it. And I'll say, I didn't ask you if you felt like eating. I asked you what you ate. So every break, 300 or 400 calories. And it's not whether you want to eat or not. It's what are you going to eat every time you stop. So those are just some thoughts on nutrition.
Thank you for sharing all that, Dr. M. Of course, we all try to avoid HAPE and HACE while we're on the mountain. But what if we get HAFE, high altitude flatulence? And when we're thinking about nutrition, we're also thinking about our digestive system. Any tips for digestive tracts up at altitude? We know it's a common problem.
Yeah. It happens, and it has to do with how you're digesting stuff and also the pressure up there. But yeah, I mean, you can get kind of stinky. I remember I was on Aconcagua with a friend of mine, and we were in a tiny little tent, head to foot, and we would each warn the other one, like, yo, I'm going to get out of my sleeping bag now so that, we could like pull the buff up and put a little cinnamon in there because you do get stinky. I mean, that's just life on the planet. I've never had a tent blow up when I lit a lighter in there yet, but it is just part of life at altitude.
Okay, cool. So your digestive system is going to go a little haywire up high, and that is kind of expected. But I think this is why training with your nutrition plan, bringing things you love, bringing things that settle you and don't make you feel extra nauseous or extra gassy can be really helpful. And practicing that. We have a nutrition webinar, and Rebecca Dent is a nutritionist that we oftentimes recommend. She just hammers it over and over. Practice, practice. Put it in your pockets while you're training. When you're on that cold bike ride, like Alan said, in the middle of the night, you should have snacks all over and stuff that you're going to be eating on the mountain.
You're going to poop up there. Don't hold it. It's going to be weird. You're going to have to poop into like, a bucket with a garbage bag or, like there are all these strange pooping situations. Do not stop pooping or you will be in trouble. In fact, that could keep you from summiting. People that get constipated at altitude, like it follows from nutrition, right? So to speak. Just get her done. I mean, I have pooped at the South Call at 8,000 meters, but just saying, you need to do that. And everybody poops and everybody pees. So figure out how to get comfortable with that. Some people have a hard time pooping if it's not exactly right. And you're not going to have a bidet and a heated toilet seat and all that stuff. But don't put it off because the longer the poop sits in your colon, the more your colon draws water out of it and the harder it is going to be able to poop. In terms of nutrition, let's just address the fact that you need to do this. You need to do it on a regular basis and don't put it off because it'll just get harder and harder. And gas pain from constipation will take you out. So be careful about that. That's the other end of nutrition, so to speak.
It is, yeah. And then I will add being really upfront about it. And if your guide is asking, or if you're struggling with it and having a problem, this is one of the many things that you do need to talk to them about. It can lead to dehydration. It can lead to all sorts of different ailments and things and take you off the mountain. So if you are struggling with it, by all means, be open and have a conversation with your guide about it because it does need to be addressed or at least tracked.
And two things, the coffee nudge and hot sauce. Those are two things that I've noticed that will get people going if they're having a hard time. So a little sriracha or something like that will usually get people moving.
Okay, so we have one more slide that is really our core content, and then we're going to wrap it up. Acclimatization. So a lot of different concerns that people have with acclimatization. I think we've at least answered, kind of like demystified it, that acclimatization doesn't change a whole lot as you get older, and that's okay. There are a lot of different things that we can do to help ourselves out. Just simply drinking water and being fit can really help you acclimatize. Some of it's up to genetics as well. And so we want to jump into acclimatization concerns and talk about some tips and tricks to help you on the mountain. Remember, this is a whole process that your body is going through. It is a whole series of events. It's not just one single thing you're doing or one moment in time.
I mean, everybody worries about acclimatization. I remember before I went way up high the first time, I was like really worried about altitude sickness, which is wise, but it's not something that happens like suddenly. It is a process that happens slowly over time. So it's not just going to take you out. If you're paying attention to your body, and you're talking with your guide or your climbing partners, it's not going to sneak up on you. The time when people get in trouble is one, when they're minimizing it and not paying attention, or two, when they get stuck somewhere due to weather or geography that they can't get down. So don't be afraid of it, but try to understand it. Like I said earlier, an ascent profile of 300 meters or 1,000 feet per day on average, and then every 4 or 5 days taking a break, that is the best thing you can do. There are medications that you can take that I'll talk about in a second, but acclimatization, there's no magic bullet. Go at a nice even pace. Don't ever get like panting out of breath when you're ascending at altitude. Just don't do that. That predisposes you to all kinds of problems. So go nice and slow. And you're older, so you're good at going nice and slow, right? And then drink lots of water because it's your brainstem, it's your carotid body, it's your lungs, it's your kidneys, and they're all kind of figuring out, how this works. And they will figure it out. But you need to be drinking lots of water. Don't drink so much water that you become hyponatremic. Actually, Americans, it's funny because a lot of guides that aren't from the States are like, Americans just drink way too much water. And you can drink too much water, but just drink enough that your urine is clear and copious. And that helps a lot because you're dumping bicarb in your urine, and that helps you acclimatize. Talking about acclimatization, we can't talk about acclimatization without talking about acclimatization medications. So acetazolamide is a carbonic anhydrase inhibitor. But basically what that says is that it just speeds up your natural acclimatization process to some degree. It's not really masking things. It does help. It's better to not rely on medications if you can and just acclimatize naturally. But if you have a faster ascent profile or you're just feeling a little bit off, it is fine to take acetazolamide. If you're having symptoms, talk with your guide or your fellow climbers and take the smallest dose that you need to. You do not need to pre-treat with acetazolamide, which is also called Diamox. You can start taking it after you have symptoms and things will improve. But I recommend going natural, au naturel, and just trying to move nice and slowly. Being more cardiovascularly fit means that you're going to be a less stressed organism at that altitude. And so truly altitude illness and fitness, like being more fit doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to get altitude sickness. But if you think about it, if you're in good aerobic shape, you're going to be not working as hard at altitude. And so that's going to help you perform better. The other thing is you breathe more at altitude. You're just breathing more often, right? Because they're the same partial pressure of oxygen, still 21%, but the molecules are further apart, basically, so you're having to breathe more. So working on your pulmonary muscles, I did like a bunch of swimming to some degree. It's not load bearing exercise, but you are working those muscles. There's various breath work strategies where strengthening your muscles of breathing will help you do better at altitude. There's a lot of talk also about all these things that people want to do to cut the corner, to acclimatize more quickly. The fact is there are hundreds or thousands of things happening from the organismic level to the molecular level when you go to altitude. And I could talk all day about this stuff because I just think it's super cool. But the fact is just making more red blood cells is just one tiny portion of it. And so the key is to just move slowly. And there is no magic bullet at this point. You can sleep in a hypoxia tent. You can do that. It'll probably give you somewhat of a benefit, although you might not sleep well in one of those tents and they're expensive. You can do that, but that's not a magic bullet. There is no magic bullet to acclimatization. There are people that'll say, oh, hey, we're going to do this door to door in this amount of time. We're going to breathe more oxygen at altitude. If you're breathing higher flow oxygen at altitude, that means if that regulator blows or you drop your oxygen tank or something, you are extremely vulnerable. I guess that's the bottom line. Just doing what we've always done is really the way to go. And don't worry about it. Don't stress out. Just go nice and slow. Try to get good sleep. Don't drink alcohol when you're acclimatizing to altitude. Just don't do that. That's acclimatization in a nutshell. And I'm sure you wanted the magic bullet. We don't have one.
Thank you for that. I want to jump in on the hypoxico tents because I know Alan was answering quite a few questions on hey, should I be using a hypoxico tent because I live at sea level? And I've had some nice at-length conversations with Mike Hamill about this, our founder at CTSS, and people have asked this on Kilimanjaro, on Aconcagua webinars, things like that. We love hypoxico tents. If you are doing a rapid ascent, this is the way to go to prepare for it. And that is awesome. You will be feeling better. Again, it's not a magic bullet. Your body will still be unique and individual and different from time to time on the mountain. But that is how we move forward with all of our rapid ascent programs. If you're doing a regular ascent program, just a traditional expedition, again, thinking Kilimanjaro, 10 days, we've truly built in the time to acclimatize, even if you're coming from sea level. And so we really want to make sure that you can sleep before. Dr. M mentioned it. Once you get into those hypoxico tents, your sleep gets worse because you start to feel a little bit exhausted. You can get sick. Then there goes your training. There goes your nutrition training too. It snowballs all of a sudden. I know that Alan was recommending some breathwork training things. We did a wonderful webinar on breathwork training. And Alan, I was going to see if you wanted to talk about the mouthpiece and just what you know about breathwork training and how that can maybe help out as an alternative to maybe sleeping in tents if you're doing a traditional expedition.
Yeah, I used to be really skeptical of the altitude tents, but I've just seen too many people that have just really seen a benefit from it. But I think, as Dr. M said, the biggest downside is that you just don't sleep well at home in these tents. But likewise, you don't sleep well at altitude. So it kind of follows. The thing that Steffi's talking about is something called an AeroFit, if you can see it or not. But it's this little mouthpiece, and it's got a couple of gauges on it to modulate the intake and the outtake. And it has an app on your phone that goes through and has you do these breathing exercises. And this thing is actually pretty effective. It costs a couple $100, but you can order it online, and it has you just breathing in and out, and you take long breaths, short breaths, and just a lot of different exercises. Especially like if you live at sea level and you're looking to try to do something to really rev up that cardiovascular engine inside you, your heart and your lungs. This is one tool to consider.
Perfect. Awesome. And then folks, we just did a webinar like 2 weeks ago with Anthony on the breathwork training. And I know a number of climbers that are headed to Everest and Nepal this season are already working with him and have had great success using his breathwork training program. It's all research-based. And that webinar goes through all the literature too, before we get into the actual training, which is really fun. So take a peek at that. And I think that that's a really unique option. And we totally support that breathwork training in whatever capacity you want to do that in. But be very mindful if you're using a hypoxico tent, like Alan said, it has its benefit, it has its place, but it does lead to sleep issues, possible sickness, things like that.
So I'm actually using the AeroFit that Alan is talking about to work on my breathing. So I've been using it for the last 2-3 months, and it's an amazing item. And then I am sleeping in a hypoxia tent. I'm sleeping in it for 300 hours before I leave. And yes, it is harder to sleep in it. You need to really kind of get used to it. You need to keep your house cool because the tent gets very warm. But I've been able to manage it really well, where I can take an hour or half an hour in the afternoon to kind of give my body some recovery. So I add some sleep in the afternoon to help my body to recover. It hasn't really affected my training, but my hypoxia elevation is getting pretty high right now. So it's probably going to affect me more as I'm getting closer. Yeah.
Awesome. So using the AeroFit, and then she's also integrating in hypoxico training as well, which is awesome. So that's Eva's individualized plan that she's kind of worked out and sounds like you're having success with. So folks, I am going to take the wheel here, but we are officially launching our Master's Mountaineering program. This is designed for climbers 50 and above who are just looking to be with like-minded climbers, go a slower pace, and just have the support of already our wonderful world-class guides in an environment that is designed just for them. We do all women's climbs, and now we're branching out into doing these master climbs as well. We had a newsletter go out last week to get people's feedback on where we'd like to go in the future with our Master's Mountaineering program. A lot of folks expressed interest in intermediate climbs, or Zaba, Cotopaxi, Lobuche, Three Peaks in Nepal, things like that were of top priority. And we have gone ahead and launched our Master's Mountaineering program on 3 of our nice introductory peaks just to get people started. So we are officially launching this year a 5-day Master's program on Mount Baker. We are actively booking that right now. You can see more on our website. This program, which is here in the States, is a wonderful program if you're really looking to go to the Himalayas, go climb Aconcagua, get on Cotopaxi in the future, do these glaciated climbs. So this climb will be led by Dallas Glass. He's one of our incredible guides. He joined us for our Mount Baker webinar, which you can also find on our YouTube. So this is going to be a great place to hone your skills. I'm curious, Dr. M, how many times have you been on Mount Baker?
Actually, not that many times, honestly. Probably a dozen or something like that. Well, maybe more than that. I've skied it a bunch of times too. But it's a great, honestly, if you want to get into glacier stuff, Mount Baker is the ticket. Everybody's looking at Rainier, but Baker is awesome. It's a great place to start. And I do take people up there. And I also have to say, I've known and worked with Dallas Glass for probably 20 years now, and he is exceptional. So that's a great program.
Very cool. I love it. And then I am excited to share that in 2026, next year, we are also looking at doing a 6-day program because we are seeing and hearing your feedback about slower paces, more time on the mountain, and going ahead and extending out that timeline a little bit. So we are trying to integrate your feedback. We really are looking at this. We want this program to be shaped by all of your thoughts of what will support you in the mountains. So the other peak that we're headed to in 2025 to kick things off is Kilimanjaro. We love Kilimanjaro. This is the gateway to mountaineering. And so we're starting with the 10-day climb on the Mashame route. We aren't adjusting our schedule right now because we love the way the acclimatization is set up on there. What we are doing on this climb is we're having it led by Dr. Brenton. We have a couple of doctors that we work with, like Dr. M right here. Dr. Brenton is one of another incredible guides. He's been on the Himalayan rescue team. He's been the ER doc for Everest before. And we wanted to have him join our climb just because sometimes people are feeling concerned about altitude, their illnesses, what's going on physically in their body, maybe knee pain. And Dr. Brent is going to be the perfect person to be there with you. We usually staff a lot of our Kilimanjaro climbs with these, what we dub as star guides. We've had Tindi Sherpa and Pega Sherpa lead them as well. Pega is going to be Eva's guide on Everest. So that's going to be fun. So full circle there. But we love to put guides like Dr. Brent and like Pega on these climbs because we want you to get to know what it's like to work with the caliber of guides that we bring. So if you do climb Aconcagua, if you do climb Everest, you're already getting to know what it feels like to be with world-class guides, ask the questions, go the right acclimatization pace, things like that. If you're looking to get that intro to mountain living, climbing at high altitudes, Baker's not very tall. Kilimanjaro is tall. So this is going to test your acclimatizations. And really, this peak is great. You just have to commit to training. And we feel really confident in our master's program being able to commit to training. So those are our 2 climbs. And then we did a webinar, a month ago with Mike Hamill and myself on Kilimanjaro. And he talks a lot more about the pacing, the acclimatization, and also how we set ourselves apart as an expedition company leading a Kilimanjaro climb. And he really looks at it as an expedition and not just a trek, because that's the mindset we want to have. That wraps up our 2 climbs that we're leading. I want to go ahead and just share contacts. So you will see here, Alan, Eva, and Dr. M have all shared their contacts. You can email them. Follow along with Eva's journey on Everest. Alan is incredibly wise and always sharing things on his social platforms, just keeping the pulse of what's happening in Everest and Nepal and things like that. Then Emily's email is there if you have questions for her as a guide or as a medical professional.
The only thing I would like to say is if you want to follow my journey on Everest, follow me on Instagram or on Facebook. And then I'm also going to be sharing my Garmin InReach via Instagram and Facebook. So you can follow me on the mountain as I go up and down on rotation. So you know exactly where I'm at.
Yeah, and you can't follow my journey because I hardly have time to get my laundry done. So I wish I had time to post to social media. But if you have a question, you can email me.
I was just a plug for my blog because what I do is I cover Everest. I have for 25 years now, whatever. And it's become a labor of love is that I post about every few days during the Everest season. I keep up with all the teams. I've got my moles in the mountains that give me inside information. And what I try to do is to cover the trends, the bigger picture, not so much the minutia, because these days everybody has social media. So, people can speak for themselves, but I try to cover the bigger trends and look at what's really happening on the mountain. I interview people directly from the mountain. I bring in a world-class meteorologist in all my podcasts. So every season, my wife calls it my tax season because she doesn't see me for 2 months because I'm up in the middle of the night, seeing what happened on Everest and things like that. So I invite you to go to my website. The links are all there. And also, if anybody has any other questions, feel free to email me directly. I'm more than happy to talk about this. As you can tell, I talk too much. And I love talking about this stuff. I love mountaineering.
I just want to give a massive thank you to Alan, Eva, and Dr. Emily for being here with us today. You guys had so much good stuff to share. The last thing I want to end with is just an appreciation for CTSS. It's the company I have the pleasure of working with. And if you would like to book a call with our team to talk about your goals, our master's program, our philosophy, of course, you can check our website and check us out online, but you can also schedule a free call with our team and we can chat with you. You'll either meet with Mike Hamill or Caroline Pemberton, depending on what your goals are and who's available as well. Folks, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Any final thoughts?
Just get out there and do stuff. We'll see you on the mountain. Shopping for mountain gear is not a recreational activity. Put your pack on and get out the door. We'll see you out there.
Well said.
I love it.
Alrighty, folks, that's going to wrap it up today. Thank you for coming, and I hope you have a good evening or morning or afternoon, wherever you are, and keep your eyes out for our next webinar. Alrighty, folks, that is it.
Right on.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.